I'm Linda Augsburg with American Patchwork and Quilting, and I'm here with Brenda and Vicki from Handi Quilter. And Brenda, you're a big collector of vintage quilt tops.
I absolutely am. I'm a quilter as well, but I have turned into a collector. I have been collecting vintage quilt tops for more than 40 years.
Wow, and you've got a great collection now. You have certain things you look for when you're buying a vintage top.
You know, the things I'm looking for have changed through the years. When I was a 20-year-old farm wife going to farm sales and buying quilt tops like the one behind you with all the hexagons, I was frankly thinking about quilt tops that didn't need a lot of quilting. And now that I've been at Handi Quilter and rubbing shoulders with people like Vicki, I have turned into someone who looks for quilts with lots of real estate.
So tell me what real estate means.
I'm going to let Vicki tell you.
Well, real estate means that there's open property, whether it's a solid color like this, or there's a lot of white, or
big circle
light color.
spaces.
Yeah, this is all solid, but property, real estate to really let the quilting show.
So not just big open areas.
Not just big. You could totally big open areas, but real estate because I want my quilting. That's what I am. I'm the quilter.
Right.
And I want that quilting to really be a main event in the quilting. And maybe some quilts you don't, so that you want that piecing. But the quilting has got to stand on its own too.
Well, speaking of the quilting standing on its own, now you showed me this triangle quilt, and you saw something very different than any of the rest of us saw.
And Brenda didn't see this when, she says, oh, I want this quilted. You didn't see this. But I'm going to roll this plastic out here, this preview paper. This is what I saw.
Oh, a star.
That's right. And so this is a vintage quilt. It needed feathers.
Of course.
And so we start in the center and add a spine and a curved spine and bring that down, and we can stitch right back down and then just start quilting feathers. And fill this up with feathers. And it's a lot easier to quilt on fabric than it is to draw on plastic.
Of course it is.
And then just come back down. Like I say, it's a lot easier. Whoa, look how shaky that is. Bring that in. And then just repeat that on every feather around there.
Did you make a conscious effort to pick one thread color, or how did that work for you?
I actually chose white so that it matched here, but it goes well in that yellow. It just blends through there. White is
Vicki,
also.
I don't believe it's white.
It is, Brenda.
It looks pink in the pink.
I know, it's like a chameleon thread that the thread picks up the color of the fabric. It really is. So as we look through here, it does look like it's peach, but
really
it's
does.
white.
So that's great. Now, is there anything you would do different if you did this quilt again?
Why would you? Yes, I always think of that. I would actually probably do a channel around here that would even frame that more.
Okay.
And I only used one layer of batting on this. I would use 2 layers because then you'd really see some
That
deep
would really pop.
texturing.
Yep.
You know, Linda, that 2 layers of quilt, or 2 layers of batting is something that the Handi Quilter educators have taught me. They'll use an 80-20 batting as a foundation layer, and then they'll put wool on top of it. And it's that wool that pops up in those beautiful feathers and other kind of open quilting designs.
Well, and when you're an amazing quilter, you really do want that quilting to show, so
do.
that really helps
You
it
do.
pop.
Yes.
Now, we've got a second example here.
So you talked about thread color.
I did.
Okay, so you see the thread color here. I wouldn't use red in the white because that just wouldn't work, would it?
No, it seems like it would be a little
I
too
want
showy.
that texture in the white, but would I use white in the red? I really like the red, so there's a thread color change. Yellow, the red, so let's look on the
Let's show that
back.
off, I was going to say. So
And
here
you can see the
Mm-hmm.
red, which is, there's not a problem with that on the back. You know,
Right.
having that red, it's a whole nother quilt on the back.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
beautiful on the back.
Vicki, I've heard a lot of beginner quilters who come to us and say they want to use one thread color on the back and they want it to match the back. So this would probably bother some people. So why is this a good idea?
Well, because as you're doing long arm quilting and you're moving that machine in all directions, there is always a tendency for the thread to have just a change of tension a little bit. And So you want to match the top thread with the bobbin thread, and quilters will say, no, I don't want to do that. And I think, wait, if you are hand quilting this, what thread are you going to choose? Because you're going to get the same thread going
In and out.
down as in and out. So it's okay.
And now, when you were quilting this on the long arm, would you have done the white pass of thread first and then come back in and done
That's
the
a good
red
question.
pass and the yellow pass? Is
There's
that how you do that?
There's so much white in it, I would have gone through and stabilized it. I would have done stitch in the ditch, and, and created the channels that are here. And then, see, it's all stable then. Then you can go back and you can put in your feathers. You can do change your thread colors, go use your red, and then go to your yellow. So that would have been a lot easier, but it would have been all stable on the frame.
You know, Linda, she made a good point about stabilizing this quilt, because quilt tops that you purchase on auctions, and sometimes I buy them at those farm sales, sometimes I buy them on eBay, there's usually a reason why they were never quilted, why they were never finished. And so the long arm quilters inherit all kinds of challenges with these quilt tops. And stabilizing them, keeping them as straight as possible becomes important. That's why Debbie Brown stitched in the ditch on this one. And I think we could even show folks, there's a little pucker right here. And Debbie did her best to incorporate that in the quilting, but that pucker was there before Debbie got the quilt top.
Right. There's only so much your quilter can quilt out.
That's right. But it's
That's
still
right.
beautiful.
Exactly.
But when you say that, the tighter, the more densely quilted it is, you can quilt a lot out.
You can. Now, we've also talked a little bit between us about getting this quilted. So while I might think of hand quilting a vintage top, time just doesn't always allow that.
It would be wonderful if the whole world could have hand quilted quilts, if we could hand quilt everything, but nobody's got the time to do it.
Right.
So long arm quilting or machine quilting, a vintage quilt top is a perfectly viable solution. For one thing, you are stabilizing that quilt top. Quilt tops are open to the world. The seam allowances will fray. It's the reason we don't allow anybody to wash these quilt tops before they're quilted, even if they're a little smelly, right, Vicki? you just have to suffer
stains
through it.
on them.
Yes.
Yes. So we do launder them after they're quilted, but the quilt top itself can be rather fragile. I'm also careful when I'm buying quilt tops not to, I frankly don't have the budget to buy museum quality quilt tops.
Okay.
So there's no danger of something being taken from that museum stream with the kind of quilt tops I'm buying. These are hand-loved pieces, often hand-pieced, that were not finished, and today we can finish them, we can enjoy them, and our children can enjoy them.
That's great. I mean, done is sometimes most important, especially if it's an heirloom top, something you've gotten from a family member. I'd much rather have it finished and being in use than sitting in a trunk somewhere because it's not quilted.
That's my philosophy as well. I think if you've got a quilt top you're really concerned about, you think it maybe some museum would like it, or there's something important about it, you should talk to a quilt appraiser about it and
That's a good
have
idea.
them give you the go-ahead.
So are there any other special considerations for working with vintage quilt tops?
Just love them.
I was going to say that the wet cleaning can be a problem with old textiles. Sometimes they're not as
Color fast?
Yes, and so you've got to be very careful about that.
All right, so a little something in there maybe to catch that color as you're laundering.
And I would also advise that you do it with front-loading washing machines. Don't ever put a quilt into a washing machine with the wringer in the middle. That's just asking for trouble. But front-loading machines are much gentler and easier on your quilts.
Thank you both so much for these tips. I know they're going to help other vintage top collectors like me get those quilts quilted.